When you think of NASCAR's most dangerous tracks, you typically think of Daytona or Talladega. However, there was a point when the most feared track was one you might not expect, and that was Pocono Raceway. We were somewhat reminded of this earlier in the year, with Kurt Busch sustaining a head injury in a qualifying crash. How often do drivers miss races for injury anymore? Well, back in the day, it was relatively common, especially at Pocono Raceway. Right before the video starts, make sure you leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss a video. Anyways, let's get right into it. To get to the real brutality of the racetrack, we'll have to go back over 40 years ago. Although the track held its first race in 1971, the first incident on this list wouldn't be until 1980.
Sustained a month ago at this crash at the Pocono Raceway in Pennsylvania.
Jim, Richard was going into the second turn at Pocono, but right there, he lost his right front wheel and helplessly careened right there into the wall. But at this point in the crash, the damage was all on the right side of the car. Richard was still fine inside. There's Buddy Baker going by in front of you. Now watch this. Chuck Bown appears spinning backwards. He gets by Richard. Now, here comes Darrell Waltrip for the hit.
Richard Petty slid down the racetrack and was struck by an oncoming Darrell Waltrip. Talking to his team after the race, Richard said, "I feel like I broke my neck." And what do you know? After being taken to a local hospital, it was discovered that not only his neck was broken, but it had been broken before and Petty never knew. This didn't faze the King, as just a couple of days later he qualified on the third row at Talladega and didn't miss a race. Just a couple of years later, Dale Earnhardt would suffer his second flip in the Cup Series. After battling with Tim Richmond, the pair tangled with Dale, getting the worst of it by far. In a 1987 interview, Earnhardt said that when he saw Tim Richmond running towards him, that he was coming to, quote, "whip my butt and I can't even defend myself." Richmond was actually running over to check on Earnhardt's condition. Earnhardt suffered a broken kneecap in the wreck, but like Petty a couple of years before him, he didn't miss a beat and would race the next weekend.
And there's Earnhardt. He's okay. Earnhardt being helped by Tim Richmond coming across the track. Looks like Dale may have bumped up a leg just a little bit, but he looks okay, and the track doctors will take a close look at him. We see Earnhardt making his way toward the ambulance here at Pocono International Raceway.
Bobby Allison involved along.
The caution flag is out here at Pocono International Raceway.
In 1988, the saddest incident on this list occurred. Before the opening lap of the 1988 Miller High Life 500, Bobby Allison was told that he had a tire going down. He decided that he would risk it and stay out. Unfortunately, the tire didn't hold up, and after spinning, Bobby was T-boned by Jocko Magicamo. Both drivers were knocked unconscious, but fortunately Jocko was able to wake up and be treated for minor injuries in the infield care center. Doctors put a steel rod in Allison's left leg, and he had surgery on his skull to reduce swelling in the brain. 2 weeks after the incident, he still had not spoken a word. Allison managed to recover fully, but side effects still haunt him. According to Bobby, because of the incident, he wasn't able to remember his 1988 Daytona 500 victory where his son finished in second behind him. "For 2 solid months, I couldn't add 2 and 2, Allison told a reporter 10 years after the crash. "I was conscious, but I had no idea who was who or where I was or what year it was. I sat and cried like a 2-year-old. The world was really mixed up to me. Early on, I was really mad that they let me live."
Might be indeed what it is. He might have snapped an axle here. And a trouble. Oh, we have a car upside down, rolling down the racetrack. That's the number 48 car, driven by Greg Sachs. Looks like Lakespeed. Lakespeed also involved.
Lakespeed was bumped from behind heading into turn 1 and lost control of his car. He came up the track and took out Greg Sachs, who hit the wall so hard that he completely destroyed the wall and flipped several times. Somehow, Sachs was uninjured in the crash. Lakespeed was injured, however, and missed 5 races due to a broken collarbone.
Here comes back down. Over and over for Winston Cup cars and how strong they are. Look at that thing. You can see the fire, Benny, under the hood of the car, and then it rests back on the top. And
over side, end over end, and Davey Allison has experienced a horrifying crash.
At the same place his father had his career-ending crash just 4 years earlier, Davey Allison had this tremendous crash. Slight contact from Darrell Waltrip set it off, where Davey flipped numerous times. Allison was airlifted to a local hospital to be treated for a concussion, along with a broken arm, wrist, and collarbone. The next week at Talladega, Davey remarkably showed up for the race and took the green flag, but would be replaced by Bobby Hillin Jr. in the middle of the race.
We're under the caution for the second time today, a grinding crash in turn one. Sterling Marlin may have gotten into the back of Chuck Bown, and the two cars went hard into the wall at turn number one. You see Marlin walking from his car down toward where Chuck Bown sits.
2 years later, Sterling Marlin got into the back of Chuck Bown, who completely lost control of his car and hit the outside wall driver's side first. The 1990 NASCAR Busch Series champion was attempting his first full season ever in the Cup Series, but unfortunately he would miss the rest of the season after the wreck. At first he was diagnosed with only a concussion, but 5 days later it was found that Chuck also had a broken wrist. Then the next week he was diagnosed with a broken ankle.
Catches and snaps back on him. That's because you're going so fast, the car's laid over in the right rear so hard. He couldn't really get the right rear to keep on moving like you would on a dirt track, and it snatched back on him.
97, they picked the car he won the Brickyard 400 with, also won at Dover with his same race car.
Oh, Dave Marcus in trouble in turn two.
Look at the damage to the front of this race car. Back and front.
Dave Marcus hitting a ton. You see him moving there.
Dave Marcus would experience one of the hardest single-car crashes in NASCAR history in 1999. A violent crash like this, especially in those days, would have everyone concerned for Dave's safety. Well, unlike most crashes in this list, Dave was able to walk away under his own power and escape with no injury. He was taken to a hospital for precautionary measures, but only dealt with soreness. Dave knew he was lucky, and even said on the Scene Vault podcast that he would have, quote, died for sure if it wasn't for his shoulder straps. This was a safety mechanism not required at the time of the incident.
Oh, trouble! Steve Park is off into the infield. Another car ball over on his lid. It's Parkindale Jr. Terrible crash.
Man, Steve Park's car just turned dead left when he came off turn two.
On the first lap of the 2002 Pocono 500, probably the scariest looking accident in Pocono's history occurred. Teammates Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Steve Park were sent flying into the infield after Park made contact with Rusty Wallace. After both cars came to rest, Dale Jr. jumped out of his car and ran to check on his friend and arrived first on the scene. Park was visibly shaken, but had no serious injuries after the wreck.
And that's almost what it looked like. That one car just turned dead sideways.
Well, what a great shot that is. Teammates walking away from a crash like that, arm in arm.
Kenny Schrader is okay, climbed out of his car unhurt, and I tell you that first because when you see the video, you'll wonder how.
Gets around right there going down into turn one. Could be a oh my goodness. Upside down,
you're
over.
entering that corner at almost 200 miles per hour.
That had to be quite a ride right there.
Just 7 laps into the Pocono 500, Ken Schrader had one of the wildest rides of his life. After just losing it into turn 1, Schrader flipped a single time before catching on fire. He got out under his own power before safety crews arrived. Like the last couple incidents, miraculously Schrader avoided injury. So, as we've discovered, Pocono has had its fair share of awful crashes from the 80s to the early 2000s. Now, this happened for numerous reasons. First of all, bigger crashes will naturally come with higher speeds and bigger tracks. That one is pretty obvious. The second reason is how sharp the turns are, creating worse angles for cars to hit. Basic math can explain this pretty obviously. 360 degrees divided by 3 turns means that each turn is an average of 120 degrees compared to a typical track that has 4 turns with each turn of an average of 90 degrees. I mean, look at the difference between Pocono Turn 1 and Charlotte Turn 1. It's pretty staggering. And despite covering only these crashes from the 80s to the early 2000s, there have been more wild crashes over the years at Pocono. Elliott Sadler's 2010 crash, Casey Kane's 2009 crash, Jimmy Johnson and Bubba Wallace's brake failures. Pocono really hasn't slowed down in producing frightening crashes, and in my opinion is probably the most underrated track in terms of how dangerous it is. Anyways guys, that's it for this video. I hope you did enjoy, and if you did, make sure you leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this. Also, be sure to leave some suggestions in the comments for some tracks that you'd like me to cover in the future, or videos in general. Anyways guys, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.